Welcome to the Queer Thriving Podcast, where we draw inspiration from the past, cultivate thriving in the present, and dream boldly of a better future. Hi, I'm Kari. Any pronouns work for me? I'm glad you're here. I have been reading Hope in the Dark, The Untold History of People Power by Rebecca Solnit. This book is a great read in a time when it feels like nothing we do is going to help or matter. I don't know about you, but when I first heard the election results in November, I felt utterly helpless. Like all my bright hopes for the future had just been totally washed away, and I didn't know yet what remained. It pushed me into this place of inaction. It pushed me into not knowing what to do or how to do anything. It made me not want to do anything, to just sit in hopelessness and mourn. But one thing I have been slowly realizing is that this feeling of helplessness in the face of systemic obstacles is something that has been purposely cultivated by those in positions of power. If you were to realize how much power you really have, you would be able to wield it more effectively. And people in positions of power don't want things to change. Rebecca Solnit puts it this way. Your opponents would love you to believe that it's hopeless, that you have no power, that there's no reason to act, that you can't win. Hope is a gift you don't have to surrender. A power you don't have to throw away. In other words, hope is pushing back on this narrative of helplessness that gets handed to us. Grassroots movements are often dismissed as radical. Protests are portrayed as violent riots, and thus the righteous anger gets delegitimized. Propaganda and oversimplifications of complex situations get circulated in hopes of establishing a narrative more acceptable to the existing power systems. Let's look at how this played out more specifically with a particular case study. I would like us to look at the Black Lives Matter movement, because that is something that we were all able to see play out in real time in front of us, and is recent enough that I think we will all remember. The movement was portrayed as radical in the media, right? For a whole variety of reasons. Just to see what stuck. BLM was reverse racist, or maybe it was out of touch because it wanted to get rid of all forms of law enforcement. Or maybe it was just misleading people into thinking systemic oppression existed, where it was actually just a series of isolated incidents. Don't look too closely at patterns. Then the protests were framed as riots, as if this inherently means that the thing that people are protesting is therefore illegitimate. But just because there is violence, that does not delegitimize the core argument someone is making. Then there were the clever propaganda quips and oversimplifications that got circulated. The response to Black Lives Matter became Blue Lives Matter, or All Lives Matter, as if there wasn't a systemic reason to recognize that Black lives were being consistently thrown away, as if they did not matter in a way that others did not have to deal with. This thought-stopping quip, All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, made it easy for people to refute a simplified version of the movement, without having to confront the actual difficult truths and nuances that came with the BLM grassroots efforts. But what came out of all that? All those marches, all that speaking out and organizing, what did it actually do? I don't know about you, but I feel like I have seen very little in the media about what the Black Lives Matter movement has accomplished, which makes me feel like all that effort was for nothing. But that's not true at all. There are plenty of wins to point to. For example, the passing of Breonna's Law in Louisville, Kentucky, outlawing no-knock search warrants. New York City banning chokeholds and repealing a law which kept police disciplinary records confidential, which means access to these records increases accountability. California made the standard for use of deadly force be that it was necessary rather than just reasonable. Colorado banned chokeholds and mandated body cameras. Minneapolis, Seattle, and Austin all reallocated significant police funds to community programs focusing on safety, housing, and emergency response initiatives. Many major corporations implemented diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Over 160 Confederate monuments and symbols were removed or renamed between 2020 and 2021 alone. The DOJ investigated misconduct in Minneapolis and Louisville. And it brought systemic racism into the forefront of cultural awareness, especially for white people. So yeah, did you know all that had happened? Sure, there were some small local news stories about each of these, but on the national stage, not so much. Instead, we have been led to believe that the movement hasn't accomplished a whole lot since we just haven't heard about it. That's because that's a convenient thing for us to believe, isn't it? That all that activism and mobilization that galvanized the nation would come to nothing. It makes you feel like, well, if an effort on that scale doesn't make a difference, how can I? But that absolutely isn't true. That was a very incomplete list, and it doesn't include all the ways ordinary people with white privilege woke up to the fact that they have been benefiting from a racist system their whole lives that has been holding down their black and brown friends and neighbors. Don't underestimate the slow drip of a shift in cultural attitude toward a subject. That is the major thing that has instigated change. We're going to go back to Rebecca Solnit again because I just love how she puts it. She says, "Ideas at first considered outrageous or ridiculous or extreme gradually become what people think they've always believed. How the transformation happened is rarely remembered, in part because it's compromising. It recalls the mainstream when the mainstream was, say, rabidly homophobic or racist in a way that it no longer is. And it recalls that power comes from the shadows and the margins, that our hope is in the dark, around the edges, not the limelight of center stage." Shifting a cultural narrative, even starting on a small scale, is what makes lasting change. It makes a cultural context in which Democrats and Republicans unanimously vote for Breonna's Law to stop no-knock search warrants, despite it having been a controversial issue for years. It places in people a cultural expectation that public monuments of the Confederacy are being phased out and replaced with symbols that represent us at our best. It creates a world in which there's pressure on police departments to reallocate millions of dollars in bloated budgets to initiatives that will actually help people rather than simply seek to punish them. So when you're feeling helpless in the face of all the opposition, just remember that people in power want you to feel that way. And don't worry, you're allowed to feel what you feel. Just don't let it immobilize you. Keep at least a flicker of hope burning and know that people's perspectives can and do shift, and that grassroots movements really do have the ability to make a powerful impact on the present and the future. Until next time, keep resisting, keep dreaming, and keep thriving.